On the distant planet of Talor, where the sky shimmered with the hues of 100 stars, and the air was thick with the scent of strange flowers, Princess Zira paced in the royal gardens. Her golden skin reflected the soft light, giving her an almost ethereal glow. To anyone who looked at her, she was the epitome of beauty, grace, and power. Her eyes, as bright as the 2 moons that hung over the planet, gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Yet, despite her stunning appearance, there was an emptiness in her heart that she could not escape. As the heir to the Kareth throne, Zira had always been told that her beauty was her greatest strength. In a society where physical appearance was closely tied to one's status, the pressure to remain flawless was constant. Zira had always played her role well, but something deep within her longed for more. She wished that people could see her for who she truly was, not just the shimmering image she presented to the world. Today was no different. She was preparing to meet the human diplomat, Captain Eric Dawson, who had arrived to help with the peace negotiations between Talor and Earth. He had arrived only a few days ago, and Zira had heard much about him. He was known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind, a man who had already earned the respect of many on the planet. As she waited for him to arrive, Zira felt the familiar weight of expectation bearing down on her. She was about to meet a human, someone from another world, and she couldn't help but wonder what he would think of her. Would he see her as the Kareth people did? Would he value her beauty above all else? The sound of footsteps on the gravel path broke her thoughts. Zira turned, and there he was, Captain Eric Dawson. He was taller than most humans she had met, with dark hair that fell in soft waves, and a pair of deep blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. His uniform was pristine, with the symbol of peace on his chest. He smiled when he saw her, his expression warm and genuine. "Princess Zira," he said, bowing slightly. "It's an honor to meet you." Zira's heart skipped a beat. She had heard much about his reputation, but she hadn't expected him to be so calming. There was something about the way he spoke that made her feel at ease, as if she were meeting an old friend rather than a diplomat. "The honor is mine, Captain," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I've heard much about you." Dawson smiled again. "I hope it's all good things." She let out a small laugh, the sound light and musical. "Mostly," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of amusement. "But I have one question for you, Captain." Dawson raised an eyebrow, curious. Without thinking, Zira blurted out, "Do you find me ugly, human?" The question hung in the air, surprising both of them. Dawson blinked, clearly taken aback. For a moment, Zira wondered if she had said something wrong, if her vulnerability had been too much. But then Dawson let out a short laugh, the sound genuine and warm. "Ugly?" he repeated, shaking his head. "No, Princess, quite the opposite, actually." Zira felt a wave of relief wash over her, but at the same time, she was puzzled. Why had she asked him that question? What had made her doubt herself so? She had spent her entire life hearing about her beauty. But still, there was a part of her that questioned whether anyone truly saw her for who she was. She wasn't just a princess. She wasn't just a beautiful figure to be admired. She was more than that. But who would see that? Dawson noticed the look on her face. "If you don't mind me asking," he said gently, "why would you ask me such a thing?" Zira hesitated. She had always been taught to maintain an air of regal composure, to never show weakness. But there was something about Dawson's calm demeanor that made her feel she could open up. Just a little. "I guess I've always been told that my beauty is my most important quality," she said, her voice softening. "People have always looked at me and only seen this." She gestured to her flawless features, the perfect symmetry of her face, the radiance of her skin. "I see," Dawson said thoughtfully. "And you don't want that to be the only thing people see?" Zira nodded, feeling a sense of relief. It was as if Dawson could see right into her soul. "Yes, I want to be seen for who I am inside, not just what's on the outside. Dawson smiled warmly, understanding. I think you're more than just your appearance, Princess. I can tell you're a person of great intelligence, strength, and leadership. And I have no doubt that others will see that in you too, once they get to know you. Zira felt a lump form in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Not with such sincerity. She had always been praised for her beauty, but no one had ever praised her mind, her heart, or her abilities as a leader. Before she could respond, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath them, sending both of them stumbling. Zira's eyes widened in alarm, and Dawson immediately reached for her arm, steadying her. What was that? Zira gasped, her voice full of worry. Dawson's face hardened. That doesn't sound like a natural disaster. Stay close to me, Princess. They rushed toward the palace, where the royal guard had already mobilized. The sky above was filled with the roar of distant explosions, and the air was thick with the sound of sirens. Zira's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She had lived through attacks before, but this one felt different. There was a sense of urgency, of something far more dangerous than she had ever known. As they entered the palace, Zira found her father, King Eric, already giving orders to his generals. His face was grim as he turned to his daughter. Zira, you need to stay here. It's not safe outside. Zira opened her mouth to protest, but her father held up a hand. I know you want to help, but you're not trained for this. Let the guards handle it. I can help, she insisted, her voice firm. I'm not just a princess, father. I'm capable of more than you think. King Eric's gaze softened, but he didn't relent. You must stay here for now. We'll keep you safe. Zira felt frustration rise within her, but before she could argue further, another explosion shook the ground, this one closer. The palace was under attack. Dawson's voice cut through the chaos. Princess, we need to go. Now. With no time left to argue, Zira followed Dawson as they rushed down the hallways, the sound of the explosion growing louder. She could feel the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. Her father had always treated her like the delicate flower of the kingdom, but now, as the palace shook and the threat grew closer, Zira realized that it was up to her to step up, to prove that she was more than just her beauty. As they reached the outer courtyard, Zira's heart raced. She had never felt so helpless in her life. But just as they were about to reach the exit, a group of armed invaders appeared before them, blocking their path. Dawson didn't hesitate. Stay behind me, he ordered. Zira's hand tightened around the hilt of her sword, ready to defend herself if necessary. For the first time in her life, she didn't care about how she looked. She didn't care about being the perfect princess. All that mattered now was survival. The sound of weapons clashing and explosions echoed through the palace grounds. Princess Zira stood behind Captain Eric Dawson, her heart racing. She had never seen the royal guards move so swiftly. But there was something different in the air today. The palace was under attack, and the familiar walls of her home now felt more like a prison. Dawson's calm presence next to her was the only thing that kept her grounded. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the chaos around them. The royal guards fought fiercely, but the invaders were numerous. Zira could see their faces, their movements swift and calculated. This was no random attack. Whoever they were, they had come with a clear plan. Stay close to me, Dawson said in a low voice, guiding her towards a nearby corridor. Zira nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her father, King Eric, had always kept the palace safe. How could this happen? How had they breached the royal defenses? As they made their way down the hallway, Zira felt the weight of the situation settling in. The attack wasn't just physical. There was something personal about it. Something that seemed aimed directly at her. The rebels, whoever they were, seemed to know exactly when and where to strike. They reached the royal chambers, where Zira's father stood with a group of generals. His face was lined with concern, his usual composure shaken for the first time Zira could remember. "Father," Zira called out, hurrying toward him. "What's going on? Who are they?" King Yirik turned to her, his face softening for a moment. "Zira, I need you to stay inside. It's too dangerous out there." "No, father. I need to know," she insisted. "I have to understand." King Yirik looked at Dawson for support, and the human captain gave a slight nod. Zira had noticed something between them, the way Dawson had been watching her father, as if weighing something. She couldn't tell what it was, but the uncertainty made her uneasy. "Princess, this is no ordinary attack," King Yirik explained, his voice strained. "This is the work of an underground faction. They're not just here to kill. They're here to send a message." Zira's stomach tightened. "A message? What kind of message?" "They're calling for a revolution. They believe the Kareth have become too obsessed with beauty and status," her father continued, his tone bitter. "They think we've forgotten our true values, wisdom, unity, strength, and they want to take the throne from me." The words hit Zira like a slap. She had heard whispers of rebellion in the capital, but she never imagined it would come to this. These rebels, these dissidents, were not just fighting against her father's rule, they were attacking everything she had ever known. She had always been told that beauty and power were inseparable, that her appearance was her strength. But now, these rebels were challenging that very idea. "What do they want from me?" Zira asked, her voice trembling. King Yirik's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter. "They want you to be the symbol of their cause. They want you to lead them." Zira's heart skipped a beat. Lead them? She could barely lead herself. She wasn't a fighter, and she certainly wasn't ready to take on the weight of a revolution. Her life had always been planned for her. Marriage, diplomacy, royalty, nothing ever had to do with the messy reality of leadership. "I can't," she whispered, looking down at the ground. Dawson stepped forward then, his voice steady and reassuring. "Princess, you don't have to do this alone. You've already shown more courage than anyone else I've met. You're capable of leading, even if you don't believe it yet." Zira looked up at him, searching his eyes. She could see the sincerity there, but there was also something else, a quiet determination. Dawson didn't look at her as the beautiful princess. He didn't see her as a figure to be admired from afar. Instead, he saw her as a person, a leader in the making. "We'll help you," Dawson said, as if reading her thoughts. "I'm with you." Zira felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words. But the fear still gnawed at her. Could she really do this? Could she really lead her people through this? She wasn't sure, but for the first time, she felt like there was hope. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. A group of rebels appeared at the entrance of the chamber, their faces hidden behind masks. They were armed, and their eyes glinted with a dangerous resolve. The leader, a tall figure with a commanding presence, stepped forward. "Princess Zira," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "It's time. Your people have forgotten their true purpose. The Kareth must evolve or face extinction. You are the symbol of our revolution. Join us, or we will take what we want by force." Zira stood tall, her heart pounding. She knew that this moment would define her. She had no choice but to make a decision now. "I will not join you," Zira said, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "You are wrong. Beauty is not our strength. It's our wisdom, our courage, and our unity that makes us who we are. I will not be a pawn in your game." The rebel leader's eyes narrowed. "You have no choice. You will see the truth soon enough. See has not, and in time." With that, the rebels raised their weapons, and the royal guards immediately responded. Chaos erupted once again, and the air filled with the sounds of clashing swords and shouts. Zira stood frozen, her mind racing. She could hear Dawson's voice calling to her. "Princess, we need to move." Zira snapped out of her daze. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She wasn't just a figurehead. She had the power to change things. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. "Follow me," she shouted to her father and Dawson. "We'll show them what we're really made of." With that, Zira ran toward the front lines, her heart pounding in her chest. The royal guards followed her, their loyalty unwavering. Dawson stayed by her side, his steady presence giving her the strength to continue. The rebels may have underestimated her, but Zira was ready to prove them wrong. As the battle raged on, Zira fought with all the strength she had. The weight of the crown no longer felt like a burden. It was a reminder of the responsibility she now carried. She wasn't just fighting for her kingdom. She was fighting for herself, for her future. With each strike, Zira felt more alive, more in control. She had always been told that her beauty was her greatest strength, but now, she knew the truth. It was her mind, her heart, and her ability to lead that truly made her powerful. She was no longer just a princess. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the rebels slowly retreated, Zira stood tall, breathing heavily. The battle wasn't over, but this was her moment, her first step toward becoming the leader she was meant to be. The palace walls were still shaking with the remnants of the battle. Zira, breathless and exhausted, stood in the center of the throne room, her sword in hand. The chaos outside had settled, but her mind was still racing. The rebel leader and his faction had been driven back, but Zira knew this was only the beginning. The message was clear. The Kareth people were divided, and the rebellion wasn't just a threat to her father's rule. It was a challenge to everything she had ever known. Her father, King Eric, stood beside her, his face weary but proud. He had seen his daughter fight with bravery, something he had never expected from her. But there was still so much more to do. The fight was not only physical. It was a fight for their values, their culture, and their very way of life. "Zira," King Eric said softly, his voice filled with both pride and concern. "You've proven your strength today. But this rebellion, it's only the beginning." Zira nodded, her eyes focused. "I know, Father. This isn't just about fighting back. It's about understanding why they're doing this, why they believe what they do." Her father sighed. "It's about beauty. They believe we've become obsessed with appearances and lost sight of what truly matters. They think that our focus on beauty has led us away from wisdom, unity, and strength." Zira clenched her fist around her sword. "I've spent my whole life being told that beauty is everything. But it's not. I've seen that now. We need to find a way to bring our people together, not because of our looks, but because of what we stand for." The door to the throne room creaked open, and Captain Dawson stepped inside. His uniform was dirty, and there were signs of battle on his face. But he had an air of calmness that Zira found comforting. He walked over to them and nodded to King Eric, then turned his gaze to Zira. "Princess," Dawson said, "the rebellion is not over. There are still pockets of resistance around the capital. But more importantly, you've earned the respect of your people. I can see it in their eyes." Zira didn't know how to respond. The thought that her people, her kingdom, might finally see her as a leader was something she had never imagined. She had always been just the beautiful princess, a figure to be admired from a distance. But now, they were seeing something else in her. She was becoming someone they could look up to, someone they could follow. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady but full of uncertainty. Dawson met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "You lead. It's time for you to show your people what true leadership is. And it's not about beauty. It's about strength, wisdom, and courage. You've already proven you have those qualities. Now it's time to show the Kareth what they really stand for." Zira felt a weight settle on her shoulders. Could she really do this? Could she lead her people through such a tumultuous time? She had spent her whole life preparing to be the perfect princess. But now she had to be something more. She had to be a leader. "You're right," she said finally. "It's time." The next morning, the sun rose over Taylor, casting a soft golden light over the capital. But even with the calm of the dawn, the air was thick with tension. The rebellion had left its mark, and the people of Taylor were now asking themselves tough questions. What did it mean to be Kareth? What was the future of their society? Zira stood at the balcony of the palace, looking out over the city. Her father had agreed to hold a council meeting with the leaders of the capital, and Zira was to address them. The pressure was enormous. This was her chance to speak directly to the people and show them the path forward. But as she stared out at the sprawling city, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her new role. It was one thing to fight off invaders, but to change the hearts and minds of her people? That was a much harder task. "You're ready." Dawson's voice interrupted her thoughts. He had entered the room quietly, his presence as steady as ever. Zira turned to him, her expression uncertain. "I don't know if I am. I've spent my life being seen as beautiful. But now, I have to be seen as something more. I've never been prepared for this." Dawson smiled, stepping closer. "You've been preparing for this your whole life, Princess. Your wisdom, your strength, your compassion. You've always had them. You just need to believe in yourself." Zira swallowed hard, nodding slowly. She was scared, but she had no choice but to face her fear head-on. For her people, for her future. The council chamber was packed with the most influential leaders of the Kareth capital. They were waiting, their eyes expectant. As Zira entered the room, a hushed silence fell over the crowd. The murmurs of rebellion still lingered in the air. But Zira knew this was her moment. She had to show them that there was more to her than just the perfect appearance they had admired for so long. "People of Taylor," Zira began, her voice steady and strong. "We stand at a crossroads. The rebellion we have faced is not just a battle of weapons, but a battle of ideas. The rebels believe we have lost sight of what truly matters, our wisdom, our unity, our strength. They are right in one way. We have become obsessed with beauty, with appearance, with status. But beauty alone does not make us strong. It is our minds, our hearts, and our actions that define us. It is time we embrace a new vision for our future." The room was silent as Zira's words sank in. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her. But she stood tall, unwavering. She wasn't just speaking to them as a princess. She was speaking to them as a leader. "For too long, I have been seen only for my beauty," Zira continued. "I have been told that my appearance is my greatest asset, that it is what makes me worthy of the throne. But I have learned something important. True leadership does not come from the way you look. It comes from what you stand for, what you fight for, and how you bring people together." She paused, letting her words settle. The room was still, but she could feel the shift. They were listening. They were beginning to understand. "It is time for us to evolve," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We must redefine what it means to be Kareth. We must focus on the values that will carry us forward: wisdom, unity, and courage. These are the qualities that will make us stronger. These are the qualities that will unite us." The council members exchanged glances. Some of them nodded slowly, while others seemed uncertain. But Zira had done what she needed to do. She had shown them a vision of a future that was not bound by appearance, but by the strength of their character. As she finished speaking, Zira took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. Dawson stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but firm. "You did it, Princess. You've shown them who you really are." Zira smiled, feeling the weight of the crown lighter than ever before. "No, Dawson. I've shown them who we all are. It's time for us to move forward together. The weeks that followed were difficult, but Zira's leadership began to shine through. The people of Talor, though initially resistant to change, slowly began to see the wisdom in her words. The rebellion was not just quelled by force, it was quelled by the strength of her vision. The Kareth people began to embrace a new idea of beauty, one that came from within. As Zira looked out over her kingdom, she knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer the fragile princess she once was. She was the leader her people needed, and she was ready to lead them into a brighter future. And through it all, Dawson remained by her side, a steadfast ally. Together, they would rebuild, united not by appearances, but by the strength of their convictions.